Hello, everybody, and welcome back here to the Wine with Jimmy, that's me, channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. This is all about wine education, and I focus on lots of regions around the world and specific topics following key text and key syllabus to bring you the information you need to enjoy a wine region, wine topic, and so on. Here, welcome to a series on Romagna, part of Italy, which does not get much limelight or many airwaves. So we are putting it under the spotlight so you can understand it better. Now, please, if you have a question or any comments, perhaps you have been to Romagna, perhaps you've been to some of the key cities like Cesana, Forli, maybe you've been to Ravenna, Rimini, please do get in touch. It'd be great to hear about your experiences and what you would recommend. Because as I go through to this presentation, I'll talk about the key wine styles of Sangiovese and some of my favourites, which I'd urge you to go and try. But of course, there may be many others out there. So here we're on part 3, looking at Romagna Sangiovese DOC and the key subzones outlined by my recent visit to the region as two of the most important subzones. There are many important subzones, 16 in fact, but these two really stood out as some of the clear leaders in the region. That's Bertinoro and also Predappio. So I'll go through those two regions, but let's just talk about Romagna Sangiovese DOCG as a whole to begin with. Now, no doubt you have come across Sangiovese, the grape variety, before. It's a mightily important grape variety across Italy, the leading black variety grown, and we find it in many important regions such as Toscana, Umbria, and of course here in Romagna, a part of Emilia-Romagna, but also going down to places like Marche, even Molise, even Abruzzo. So you find Sangiovese really dominating the central and towards the southern sections of Italy. In Romagna, Sangiovese is certainly a grape variety they are fiercely proud of. In the previous video, I discussed the key white grape variety of Albana, but Sangiovese here makes certainly their most complex red wines from their variety of climatic conditions, topography, geology, and so on. Let's have a look at the overall picture to begin with. Now, Romagna Sangiovese's production in 2023 has actually dropped to around 9 million bottles produced, and that's down from around 10 to 11 million bottles on an annual basis. Now, this drop is part and parcel, certainly, to the difficulties experienced in the 2023 vintage with flooding, May flooding. Now, I will go through the vintages in much greater detail in video 5, but needless to say for now, it's made a significant impact, of course, dropping the production by somewhere around 10 to 20%. Now, the subzones, which I'll go through on the next slide and focusing on two specifically, but all of the subzones, the production is about 560,000 bottles. So that's approximately about 6% of the total production. But if you compare this to 2020, so in 2023, the production is actually up in terms of the subzones, increased by about a third. This means there's more focus on these subzones today. So let's look at the triangle of quality in the region. So this is our quality pyramid you can see just here. So you can see here that we have Romagna Sangiovese at the bottom, Romagna Sangiovese Superior, and Romagna Sangiovese Sottosorno or subzone, which is your highest quality. Reserva can be applied to any of these levels, so they can be claimed. That's translation into English from Italian, but they are applied to any of these. So we're talking a lot about these subzones. Now, we have two maps here. The left-hand side is, in fact, a municipality regional look at this. And you see the yellow line here on your map on this bottom left-hand corner is the Via Aemilia, the main road, of course, with, of course, all the way historical links back to the Romans who first built this. But the map at the top here is, in fact, the subzones that we find. So the 16 subzones stretching from the gateway to Romagna, which is Imola, fairly large here, and then going all the way down towards the ones nestled down around Rimini. And that is San Clemente, Coriano, and Verruccio that you see just here. So these are all of our subzones. They are linked to municipalities, villages, and towns. Now, there are low production yields in the vineyards. So for the subzones, they drop to 9 tons per hectare. That's for the subzones and reservoirs. And by law, to be a subzone Sangiovese, so listing the village or municipality name on the label, it must be a minimum of 95% Sangiovese. Now, the reality is that it's more towards 100%, but they are very honest at the Romagna Sangiovese DOC by mentioning that, in fact, they don't know for sure completely 100% if the whole of the vineyards are Sangiovese. There may be some mutations, some adaptations, and different varieties in there. So they say a minimum of 95% Sangiovese. Now, the wines must be released no earlier, so they cannot be released before the 1st of September the following year, so approximately 1 year. And if it's a subzone reserve, it'd be the 1st of December. Okay, so with this, we are going to look at really 2 very key subzones. And on this map, you'll see in the middle is Predappio, and next to that, just to the north, is Bertinoro. So Predappio, Bertinoro, very much claimed to be very leading in terms of the subzones. Okay, let's take a look at the Google Earth video. There's Italy. We're going to outline in white Emilia-Romagna, and then, of course, specifically outline further in white Romagna sitting on the Adriatic. There's Emilia-Romagna. Here is Romagna. We're going to identify some key cities first to give you an idea of the key urban landscape. So Imola, to begin with, the gateway to Romagna, famed for Formula One racing, and also the Sforza Castle, which is quite spectacular. Then down the Via Aemilia to Faenza, which is a beautiful smaller city, very much famed for its ceramics. Then Cesena, which is a beautiful location more towards the coast. The Malatestian Library is quite spectacular here. And then coastal Rimini, which is famed for tourism, spa, and wellness. It gets very busy in summer. Then, of course, we're going to focus on some topography. We're going to have a look at the Apennines, which sits to the west of the whole region, so the big central mountain range of Italy. And then to the eastern side, we'll have a look at the Adriatic. So these are 2 very important factors that help shape the climate within Romagna. We're then going to focus on 2 major subzones, but there is one subzone I did not mention in the last video, and that is Meldola. So you see this one just being highlighted in the middle, fairly large geographically, spanning to quite high altitudes in the Apennines and towards the lower zones. But importantly, we have Predappio there in pink, a very large subzone on the Rabbi River and on the right bank of the Bidente at about 120 to 400 meters. And then Bertinoro, which covers the whole municipality of the same name, the hills of Cesena, at about 100 to 350 meters. Both those areas on the Spungone-based soils. So let's mention Predappio to begin with. So this is a large subzone which extends along the valley of the Rabbi River and on the right bank of the Bidente. It's got several different parts to Predappio. So it has Predappio Alta, which of course is your higher land area, Fiumana, Ravaldino, Vecchiasano, Cusocoli, and San Zeno are the key parts of this. So, because it's so large, it has some unofficial parts of it as well. But let's not get too bogged down with that, because when you get into subzones of subzones, it gets just a little bit overtly complex. The vineyards will lie from around 120 to 400 meters above sea level, of course, that being Predappio Alta. Typically, we have clay limestone textured soils, but in the lower areas, you will find some sands. And in the middle of the Rabbi Valley, you have the Spungone soils. You'll find chalky marls and also some sandstone in the higher areas. The picture here is from the Conde winery in Predappio. So I mentioned Spungone. Love this soil, it's fantastic. So this comes from the dialect Spungno, which means spongy. It's a particular type of calcareous sandstone rock that shapes the surrounding hills and certainly influences the geology of this central territory, plus the local agriculture, but in particular the olive oil and wine production. You'll get a coarse mixture of seashells which are held together by calcareous cement. You'll see a wonderful rock there in your picture. Now, this soil originates from marine deposits of a low sea. Remember mentioning that in the previous video, from the Middle Pliocene era. It's about 3 million years ago, and Romagna was underwater at this time. Now, we say that the wines produced in these soils certainly have more of an electric note to them. They're brighter, a minerality, of course, and an excellent ability to age. So there you are in terms of the Predappio style minerality, certainly. Fairly vigorous tannins in youth that can be quite grainy, fine, but fairly obvious, and they can develop into more of a softer, silky character with age. Elegance is very much the key, certainly from the higher altitude sites, and there's less obvious fruit because of the structure. Brilliant acidity and excellent ageability with Predappio. So let's talk about a very key producer. Often she's claimed to be the princess of Romagna Sangiovese, and this is Chiara Condello. Now, she grew up in Fiumana di Predappio, which we mentioned is one of the subzones of this subzone, near her family winery Conde, which we saw a picture of earlier. And that was founded by her father, Francesco Condello, back in 2001. Now, she studied economics in Milan, and at the age of just 24, she took over her family estate and fully committed to not only preserving her family winery, but also to elevate the reputation of Sangiovese in the Romagna region. Chiara and her family believe strongly in these subzones, specifically, of course, in the locality of Predappio. And really, with her efforts and her father's efforts, we have seen this subzone, of course, reach quite dizzying heights. Now, we know there's Spungone here, and Chiara has started her own exciting project under her own label. So we have a range consisting of two 100% Sangiovese wines, a normale, which is the normal, called the Romagna Sangiovese Predappio, and then her increasingly famous style, the Reserva La Luciole. Now, farming is organic and biodynamics are practiced in the vineyard. So here is a very important wine for you. So, of course, Chiara Condello Romagna DOC Sangiovese Predappio Reserva, and the one I really enjoyed was the 2020. So here, Chiara really gave a fantastic presentation to me and colleagues about really these wines coming from here are full of life. The vineyard is just under 1 hectare. It's on Spungone, and the vineyard is surrounded by forest, experiencing quite a significant diurnal range, and it's affected by cooling winds. Practicing biodynamic, certified organic, using additions of teas and composts, and they, of course, are very respectful of the land. 250 meters, putting it into towards the highest bracket of altitude in Predappio. Spungone soils, manually harvested and fermentation with whole grapes, indigenous yeasts, and then macerated in oak for about a month and a half. You'll have whole grapes and partial whole clusters as well. This tends to add the real lovely brightness I found in this wine. It's then aged in 35 hectolitre Slavonian oak casks, which is very traditional for the area. And production is very small, somewhere between 4 to 5,000 bottles per year. I loved this. It had this kind of medium ruby colour, very bright, lifted, with red cherries, sort of almost a raspberry liqueur, Chambord, rose, floral, a little bit mineral, a little bit of white pepper. Lovely concentration of fruit, but still very fresh, and a fine, grainy, chalky tannin, which you would certainly compare to some of the finest wines from, say, Chianti Classico. Love the mineral acidity behind this, very focused, lovely style of wine. Another producer to look at here is Poderi dal Nespoli Gualdo, which you'll see just here. The vineyards for this production, so this is a separate winery, are from the Bidente Valley. It's a really great part of the Predappio zone. And this is from a producer who are really fascinating because their grape growing is through biosymbiotic system using mycorrhizal fungi in partnership with the vines. So this is where they kind of inoculate just the soil around the vines to help the roots resist disease and drought. Of course, drought can be an issue in summer. This creates colour pigmentation greater in the skins, higher to that of conventional vineyards, and better structure of tannins. They end up using less water and fertilizer and a more natural approach to the territory. 2021, this vintage that I'm about to go through, was the first of this approach. 180 meters of altitude. It's fermented in steel with only a 2-week maceration. It's aged in steel as well, with a production of around 10,000 bottles. I thought this was brilliantly fresh. Pale intensity, very mineral, quite aromatic, lavender, floral, a little bit rustic maybe with its tannin, but I liked it. It was kind of chalky, rustic tannin, vibrant acidity, with bitter red fruits like cranberries and red currant, and a little bit sour red cherry. It's slightly cedary rather, and a little bit resinous too, but lovely, elegant and light expression, well worth seeking out. The next subzone is just off to the north of Predappio, and that is Bertinoro, that you see highlighted here on your map. This picture is taken from what they call the balcony overlooking the landscape of Bertinoro. So this is on the western slope of the hills of Cesena at about 100 to 350 meters altitude as well. And there are 3 mountains that typically, where the balcony is here, there are 3 mountains which dominate this landscape: Bertinoro, Frattamaggio, and Monte Maggio. There's quite a famous sea breeze that comes from here as well, the Bora. And the soil here is this kind of ochre, browny, loam-coloured clay soils, which is rich in limestone of marine origin called Spungone. Now, the name Bertinoro, the etymology, Berte means drink it in gold, which is the legend of the Byzantine Empire, the queen, Galla Placida, wife of the kingdom. Ravenna was the king of the empire. She drank the wine and said it was good enough to be drunk in golden glasses. There is a small monastery you see here in the foreground of this picture too. The style is very well known for being mineral led. It's actually quite similar to Predappio. And one of the key producers here that I really liked was Tenuta la Viola, produced by the Gabellini family. So they moved inland from Romagna inland to Bertinoro in 1962, purchasing the land with Sangiovese and Albana vineyards. You may remember I talked through these on the Albana presentation on the previous video. Organic farming since 1998 and biodynamic practicing since 2018. So they do a selection in the vineyard. They have about 12 hectares of vineyards. 10 are owned, 2 are rented in terms of hectares, and they produce about 50,000 bottles. Now, I was very impressed by this wine. So this is the P. Honoré 2019 Reserva, Bertinoro, of course. It's a small estate-owned vineyard, which is called Vigna Vecchia, and that's in Bertinoro. It's at only 100 meters altitude on clay and lots of limestone. Grapes are handpicked in September. This is a natural ferment in stainless steel under controlled temperature, and then aged in large barrel and concrete for about 1 year and 16 months in bottle. Only 6,000 bottles produced, making very pure cherry floral style, very focused. Once again, lovely grainy tannin, lovely synergy between the acidity and the tannin, lovely minerality, sour cherries, cedar, chalky, clean, long, and elegant. For me, this was similar in style to the Chiara Condello, very sort of towards that expression, but an excellent wine, just showing a little bit of leather as well with that age. Another great producer to look at is Giovanna Madogna. I've actually went through her outlook on the previous slide, on the previous video when I talked about Albana. So these guys are fantastic at producing Albana, but also at Sangiovese as well. Giovanna is really an honest, genuine, and confident person, just like her wines. 5 miles from the Adriatic, with vineyards typically at about 200 to 350 meters. Remember, I mentioned this was very much a focus around Albarredo vine training. So you're looking at vines being trained, sort of head trained and spur pruned. And lots of clonal representation here as well. So this is the Ombroso 2019 Reserva. So these are some of the highest vineyards in Bertinoro at 300 meters. Ombroso means shady, and you'll see there's a shady character there on the front of the label. It's a 6-hectare vineyard planted in the early 1990s. It's trained as a bush vine, as we mentioned earlier, and on sort of calcareous clay soils. Now, soft pressing and destemming, fermented in stainless steel, and then a 2-month skin contact. Fantastic, interesting. Now, you'll notice I'm picking wines that have a lot of elegance behind them. That's very much my style. Lots of stainless steel in the ferment. And so about 12 months, 15 months in French tonneau, 50% new, 50% older, and then in bottle for about half a year. This is a little bit more polished, a bit more sweeter, plum, kirsch, raspberry, touch of spice, vanilla, cedar. Quite serious, but not overtly powerful. And you'll find a bit more grippy tannin, but not ripe or chewy, that sits towards the front of the mouth. It's one that needs a bit more time to develop, but fantastic style. Another one to look at, and this will be our penultimate one to mention, and that is Tenuta di Stefanelli. I had the pleasure of spending quite a bit of time with the son, Marco, but Sergio, the father, Stefanelli, is flanked by his wife and the likes of his children, like Marco, for example, very close to the Fraterterme thermal park in the Forli hinterland. They grow Sangiovese, Chardonnay, Cabernet Franc, Pinot Grigio, and Paga de Bit, which is the Pays de Depes grape variety. Here is your wine to try. And I wanted to put this in for people that like much more forward, dark, richer expressions. This is the Armonia 2019 Reserva from a single vineyard in Fraterterme di Bertinoro, 200 meters altitude. And this is a big style. Now, the family, the Stefanelli, are from Milan. They are outsiders, but they're very much integrated into the region now. And they do like their powerful style. So this is 200 meters altitude on Spungone and very low yields. So they restrict the yields to around 5 tons per hectare to give a much more greater skin ratio to juice to get much more density of color and power. 1 month macerating, then aging 2 years in French barrels. Very small production, just 1,500 bottles. But this is a big old, punchy, powerful style. Deep color, blackcurrant, cassis, chocolate, cloves, licorice, full, robust sweet tannin. Fairly meaty as well, with a bit of black pepper and chocolate on the palate. So it's one of the bigger expressions if you are keen on that style. My final producer is Bissoni. Raffaella Bissoni founded this winery in 1988 after her family name. It's nestled in the beautiful hillsides of the Castiacciano. It's a natural terrace overlooking the sea in Bertinoro. The vineyards are about 150 to 300 meters, and they benefit from the Adriatic, about 15 kilometers away. The vineyards are found on Spungone, and I mentioned that multiple times. The wine is here, as you can see. So this is the Vigna Collegio, and this is the T19, a very highly respected clone because Raffaella does quite a lot of work on clones, on sandy soils at about 160 meters. The grapes are handpicked in the first and second week of October. They're destemmed and pressed, and then alcoholic fermentation with natural yeasts and maceration over a month. The malolactic conversion will happen in oak barrels and 2 years in French oak. 12 months in bottle. Just 1,700 bottles made. This is quite an aromatic, lifted, violet, basil, oregano, bay leaf. It's really distinctive. It's medicinal, minty, with kirsch and plum. And I love this really, really fascinating herbal and even herbaceous edge to it. Quite sweet and plush fruit, grainy to chalky tannin, bright acidity, but lifted with that herbal and spicy character. A really fiercely independent style with lovely character. So do look out for that style. Okay, well, that brings me to a conclusion of the 2 key subzones, which is Bertinoro and Predappio. Please do join me as I more briefly go through the other subzones found under the Romagna Sangiovese DOC. Now, once again, if you do have any comments or questions, please do get in touch. Make sure you click like and subscribe. But until next time, see you again.